Hello, everyone. I forgot the entrance music, so sorry for the less official. Do you need this?
No, that was
Okay.
the old one.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I am very happy to be here to introduce Chris Thompson to all of you. Can we give a round of applause for Chris? You know, the reason Chris is here is thanks to many of you, our founding members, commissioned the first ever piece for Rocket City New Music. And I would say raise your hand, but most of you would be raising your hand. So, it means a lot that you were trusting in us and trusting in Chris, and also so happy that Chris is so efficient and could get us a piece so quickly. And I'm just really happy about that. So today's really about sharing, letting you get to know Chris as a composer, and hopefully that can glean some insights into why his music sounds the way it does, and maybe he can even share some specifics throughout the interview, sort of showing you his style and how he came to be the composer he is now. And hopefully that illuminates what you hear tomorrow and have a better understanding for the new piece launch party. But just as a little intro, me and Chris actually share a studio together in New York City. So we go back. However, when you share a studio, a practice studio, that just means that by design you never see each other.
Yeah, right.
So if you don't want to see your friend, get a workspace with him where you have to sign it out. You know. So that's our current situation. However, me and Chris have this sort of tradition where we play Mark Morris Dance Company's Nutcracker every time he comes into town, which is usually like every other year or so.
Hoping for this year.
Forgetting without the pandemic,
Yeah.
but yeah, whenever it comes back. And we had this tradition, the Nutcracker, it's roughly 2-hour performance and 2 percussionists sitting there, and he gets up, plays castanets, I do a tambourine thing, he does some cymbals, I do cymbals, snare drum, just entrance after entrance of all these hit tunes. And so as we were doing it, we got this tradition where we put some Sour Patch Kids out on the music stand, and every time we had an entrance, if we nailed it, we would look at the other person, grab a Sour Patch Kid, and sit down and treat ourselves.
This is purely honors. This is purely honor system about whether you nailed it or not. Let me say.
It's just something to get you through the rest. It was, and so it started off great because, it was like this treat. But by the end, we were like, we got to get some carrots or something.
I can't.
This is,
I can't even deal with Sour Patch Kids.
We gave up. But at the beginning, we'd get 2. We'd sometimes take 2.
Yeah.
But it even got to the point where we'd occasionally not play the best version of it, sit down in shame, kind of wait 5 minutes, and then be like, and just have another one. So, in the spirit of it, when you feel good about your answer, honor system, you get to have a Sour Patch Kid. Same for me. If I'm feeling like I'm charming, I'm going to do the same. So here we go.
This is amazing.
1 to start.
All right.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Okay. If anyone is just having a sweet tooth there, and feel free to come on up. And we got our non-alcoholic beers here, so we can join you guys. And can we have a toast to new music? Yeah. It's right there. Let me open mine first. Hold on. Cheers.
Cheers.
A toast to new music. Thank you to all of you for being here. All right. That's pretty good.
That was a pretty good cheers.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. So Chris, how are you?
I'm fine.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
What do you think of Huntsville so far?
Very cool.
Yeah?
Yeah.
First thing you did?
I went to the vegan food truck.
There you go.
So yeah, and then I went to the rock climbing gym, which is huge and amazing.
He went to the camp at Mid-City, so he went to perhaps the coolest new little spot in Huntsville right off the bat, so good taste.
Yeah.
So I kind of want everyone, like I said, to get to know you from your formative years as a musician until now, kind of connect the dots. But I want to start talking about you as a performer, because that's where it all started. And when it comes to you're performing, just take us from the formative years and like walk us up till now.
I started in music as a percussionist in an activity that not a lot of people know about, but I'm hoping some people know about here, which is drum and bugle corps.
Anyone?
Anyone? Yes.
The UAH students know for sure, right? Yeah.
Drum and bugle corps is like professional marching band, I guess, except that professionals get paid and kids in drum and bugle corps pay to do drum and bugle corps. But it's an activity where you tour all summer doing like a really high level, what would look like a halftime show. But we actually, these days, it's evolved to such a high level. They're doing modern composers, they're doing really sophisticated music, they're doing all kinds of really interesting stuff. So that's where I started. In high school, most people are like playing drum set in a band. I was running around a football field with the drums strapped to my back and traveling across the country in buses doing that. And that had a huge, huge impact on my worldview as a musician, because in that situation, you're in a drum line, which I'm sure you can imagine like a percussion section, like a marching percussion section. It's 8 of one instrument, 6 of another instrument. It's all these people playing in perfect unison. And so the focus on accuracy and clarity and precision is much more than you would get if your introduction to being a musician was playing in a rock band or being a solo, like playing an instrument solo, playing guitar or something like that. It was just a very, very different beginning for everything for me. And I went to college not knowing what I wanted to major in, but knowing I wanted to be in the marching band at UCLA. And that turned into being a music major, which is where I started doing orchestral percussion and contemporary music and all that, which is not what I had in mind ever before that point.
Yeah, and you know, drum and bugle corps, we call it DCI, that's the organization that does it. It is a phenomenon in music education, and it is almost cultish. And I don't mean it in a bad way, but it is. I mean, students are absolutely obsessed with it. And to get into one of these groups, it's like at the absolute peak of precision. It's more a sport almost than, you know, to some degree.
It's a competition.
Yeah.
My friend used to say like drum corps is like music, if music were sports.
Yeah.
You compete and like someone wins and someone loses, which is insane, you know.
Yeah, and you do like the same show. They go on tour with these shows. I actually did drum corps for 1 year. In my 20s, so it was a very brief. I did Glassman in 2005.
That's right.
Yeah, but I didn't march. I played marimba in the front. I just laid back while everyone was running around.
Yeah.
But you know, it's an incredible feat. And you know, imagine playing the same show right for 3 months straight, 4 months.
Played Phantom of the Opera for 12 years.
Yeah, are you talking about the real one?
Sorry, no, we'll go back to drum corps.
We'll get back to Broadway.
Drum corps is a 10-minute show that you develop in the fall, and you spend the entire spring and summer perfecting this show. And if you watch the finals performances, which they used to be broadcast on PBS, if you watch, you can tell it's like this is really, these people have been doing this nonstop all day long every day for the past 6 months. This 1 10-minute show. It's really like nothing else.
Yeah, I would agree. My computer's going to keep turning off on me. So you have some footage, I think, right? Do you have any footage of drum corps?
Is this working? Okay, so the show in drum corps happens in the football stadium, but the drum lines and the horn lines before the show warm up in the parking lots. And we always talk about the parking lot show, which back in the day, it was really a warm up, but there was a period of time in the late 80s, early 90s where it actually transformed into a show of its own, and people started writing music to be played as warm-ups in the parking lot. And then you'd get to this point where people would go to a drum corps show and not even go in the stadium. They would be there for the parking lot show.
It's like tailgating for a football game.
Yeah.
But without the...
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, right. So this is just one, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube from when I was doing this, but this is just one very short example. Matt, are you up there? Okay. I'm not sure how loud it's going to be, so I'm just going to start it and see what happens.
Wow. Wait, was there one of you? Okay, which one were you?
So I am. This line right in front of us is 5, and if you count 1, 2, the 4th head, where you can just see the front of my face. Yeah, that's me. I was 15. No.
You get a Sour Patch for that.
Yeah, you get a Sour Patch Kid.
Nailed it.
That's good. Yeah. So you can see the intense unison, the intense rhythmic energy that goes on.
Even
that.
the.
You're all playing the same kind of drums
Yes.
in this group here.
Exactly the same.
There's
And
4.
so there's 5 of us. We each
How many
have.
drums though?
Yeah, they call these the tenor drums. So it's like the tenor voice in the ensemble in between the snares and the bass drum. It's a group of 5 or 6 toms that are they're tuned very high. And so there's 5 of us who have that set. And they're on stands right now because we're in the parking lot, but in the show we would be carrying them and running around. And it's interesting, so this is the thing about this activity and the effect it had on me as a musician was this idea of unison playing. It's a lot like a violin section where you can, if you listen to a solo violinist, that is a completely different sound than the sound of a violin section in an orchestra. And it's not to say you can't hear every single note, but there's a richness and a thickness in a section playing the exact same, playing in perfect unison. Yeah. Even though they're playing in perfect unison, there's a richness and a thickness to it that comes from these extremely subtle variations in the way they play and in their instruments and all this stuff. So like in my own music, sometimes I incorporate marching percussion in it, and I record myself playing the tenors and work it into tracks. And when I do that, I overdub myself 5 times to make it like a tenor line of myself.
Right.
And I found out very quickly after I started doing this, if I just overdub myself 5 times, it still sounds like one player. I have to overdub myself 5 times and just slightly change the tuning of the drums. Just a hair, like just touch it a little bit, and then it's like a completely different thing. Wow. And in drum corps, we used to call it, it's like, are you clean? Is like, is the line clean? Is like, can you play perfectly together, those fast rolls and stuff? And, you know, is that line clean or are they dirty?
Right.
And so this idea of clean and dirty is like deeply embedded in my musical soul, clean and dirty.
Sounds complicated.
Yeah. Totally.
All right, so you did drum corps. You did that probably into college, I would say,
So I did it when I was 15 and 16. So I was done with drum corps by the time I was a senior in high school.
Okay, so then you go to UCLA.
Yeah. I thought I was going to be a computer science major, and I found out that there was a great percussion teacher there. His name's Mitch Peters, and I just decided to start studying percussion. And at that point, I had never played a marimba. I didn't know anything about, like, I remember they made us take they made me take a theory placement exam, and it's like I couldn't write the key signature for G major. You know,
right.
Like I didn't know anything about any of that. I had to start completely from scratch.
Right. Percussionists are usually the slowest to the game with that kind of thing because, you know, we're rhythm monsters. But so you're in your formative years, and, you know, we all kind of know about that. You guys back there know especially well about that. And you move on, to a master's degree? You come to New York right after?
Yeah, I was 5 years in LA, and then I came to New York to do a master's at Juilliard.
So how did, switching to New York, how did that start to shape where your focus was? Because clearly you weren't doing drum corps focused things as a player anymore when you get to Juilliard. Pinky out.
In New York, I got way more uptight. I got more focused on excerpts and orchestra playing and that kind of stuff, which didn't really go anywhere for me. But the other thing that happened was I met a bunch of composers. Probably the most important one being Nico Muhly, who was at Juilliard the same time I was, and who I ended up working with constantly in my first 5 years out of school. And that really, more than the playing, I mean, obviously it's a great place to study your instrument and to grow as a player, but like even more than that, it was like the people I met there, and that led me into contemporary music.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of teachers have said to me, or colleagues that are older and wiser have said, pay close attention to the people around you when you're going through school and coming out of school as a musician, because these are the people you're going to play with the rest of your life. Whether it be
totally true,
and maybe it's only 3 or 4 of them, but it's like you can almost trace everything in your career back to that moment.
Yeah,
couple of threads, right? And Nico being huge for you.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So
I'm always blown away by people who like move to a city and then figure it out and make it happen, because going there to be in a school situation is like such a head start.
Right.
I mean, it just put me with people that would end up being the people I worked with that got me through my first 5 years out of school.
What were those like?
It was a lot of running around and doing anything that was offered to me, most of which were like non-paying, really, really hard contemporary music gigs.
Yeah.
And it's cool. I got that really built my chops, like doing really stressful
But you're probably
contemporary music.
A lot of your friends' music at that point, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of favors.
Yeah.
So that's why you don't make friends with composers in school. Okay, so when did you feel like you found what you were going to be as a player in New York City? You're still there. I mean, we're talking,
Yeah.
I don't want to age you, but over a decade later, and you're still playing for a living. At what point did that sort of solidify, like, this is what I'm doing in New York City?
In the fall of 2006, I got an email from the percussionist in Alarm Will Sound.
Okay.
That was like, basically, we're looking for a percussionist, and your friend Sam Solomon wasn't interested, but he thought you might be.
You're runner-up. Congrats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I ended up in that group, and that's been the thing that I've done for the past 15 years.
What's Alarm Will Sound?
Alarm Will Sound is a sinfonietta instrumentation, so one on a part chamber orchestra, that does such a broad range of projects that we have a hard time actually, like, being clear to anyone like who we are and what we do, because it's such a huge range of like different styles of music. But I mean, it's basically playing music by living composers.
Right. And I would say from my experience seeing you guys it's the closest thing that a chamber orchestra could be to a band.
Right.
Right. Like an actual.
I think that's actually like in our marketing thing. Yeah. It's like the
brochure.
Yeah. I mean, Alarm does like the thorniest contemporary music, and then also like arrangements of stuff from the pop sphere. And it's funny that saying that out loud now doesn't sound that crazy, but 10 or 15 years ago, it kind of sounded crazy. I don't know.
Well, it put them on the map. And they're a big deal in New York. Everybody knows who Alarm Will Sound is. They're an amazing group, and have you to thank for a lot of that. But so that's what. Go ahead.
Do you find, are they on? Is it online?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
It's like Alarm Will Sound, like the sign you see on the door. Alarmwillsound.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's it's all on the streaming service. There are lots of albums.
Yeah, tons of albums. Yeah. Grammy nominated, right?
No.
No?
Nope. Still hasn't happened.
Okay. I think
We're waiting.
I think I just put it into existence.
I don't get a Sour Patch Kid for that one.
Actually, I feel bad, so you should have one. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you could have took that. So, okay, I think we get the idea of who you are as a player,
Yeah.
the drum corps through your big university undergraduate, finding your way to New York City, trying on all these percussive hats, finding your way into music through fellow composers and collaboration. And then that lands you essentially, and you got the gig from Sam, so you end up, those people you go to school with are,
Totally.
The people that are going to help you out or look out for you. And you land in Alarm Will Sound, and you're still there today.
Yes.
So let's get to Chris the composer, right? When did you first start composing?
Junior year of high school.
Okay.
There was a category of software called trackers. Trackers were used by video game composers in the late 80s to make soundtracks for video games. And it's like a very basic kind of crude tool for composing music using samples. And I discovered trackers and started making songs, like electronic music tracks, mainly because I wanted to like hand out a tape to people at school. But I knew I had something that that was there that I needed to do. And so, yeah, that's when it started.
So this is kind of right when you're doing drum corps too.
Yeah, totally.
So you're doing this tracker thing, which I'm not entirely sure I totally get, but it's not acoustic music.
No, it's totally electronic music.
And you're doing drum corps, and you're not classically trained by any stretch.
Not at all.
At that point.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, as a composer, just to jump a little bit forward, do you have music that involves those two?
Those two what?
Those two concepts, electronic and drum corps.
Yes,
that
definitely.
directly smushes them together.
The first two albums I put out are exactly what you just said.
Can we hear?
Yes.
A little?
Okay. Should I do? Let's play Hanabi. She hit. Okay, so this is just an example of some electronic music that includes an element which is me playing the tenors, and it's the process that I described of like overdubbing myself a bunch of times. Yeah.
Hanabi.
Yeah.
Very satisfying.
It would be Matt's gone, right?
Matt, are you up there?
Okay, it's cool. So that should I play the other one?
Yeah, I think so.
I incorporate it in two ways. One is to play it myself. The other is to sample it and chop those samples up. And
can you explain sampling?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yes. Literally, it's just taking a small bit of an audio recording and turning it into something new.
So like,
it could be
any sound and removing it.
The traditional, probably the most common version of sampling is rap artists, especially in the 80s. The process was they would find an old disco or soul record. They would find a 4-bar loop. They would sample those 4 bars and then just let them loop over and over and over again. And that was like a sample. And there's a very, very, very famous loop, which is the B-side of this record called Amen Brother. And there's a 4-bar drum break in it, which has been sampled like millions of times. In fact, there's a whole genre of music called drum and bass, which is it's basically every track has that 1 4-bar loop cut up in different ways. It was like a whole genre of music that was based on cutting up what they call the amen break.
Wow.
And I wish I had loaded it up.
Oh yeah.
Was that, is that artist compensated for that, or is
No.
four artists less?
So the original drummer of the amen break never got a penny. And a lot of it is because sampling wasn't really a thing until like the mid 90s. And then people started to notice, and then like the record executives started to notice, and it became a thing. And now you have to clear samples. Like you can't release a record.
Right.
But there are records from the late 80s and early 90s that are just like samples piled upon samples, and they never cleared anything because no one thought they had to, you know?
Right.
It's a really sad story about the amen break, actually.
Yeah.
I mean,
but,
it's been
but
used
you
so
can,
much.
that's like a forward bar loop. You can take like a note.
Yeah, so they sometimes they use the whole thing and they slow it down or speed it up. Sometimes they literally chop up every single beat in it, and they move them around and shuffle them around and you know, slow down one beat or change the pitch of it or whatever. I guess the reason I brought it up is because this next excerpt is me sampling marching percussion in that way and then chopping it up in that way.
Right. So you're not playing.
No, this is not me playing. Yeah. Find the spot. You're going to hear the end of that, what we just heard first. Sorry, the bass is insane in here.
So Sour Patch Kid
Oh,
for that.
thanks.
Yeah, that gets one. Okay, cool. So we jumped ahead, but you know, this idea of you taking, like, quite literally taking your drum corps stuff and putting it into a completely different style of music.
Yes.
Is unique to you. I mean, I'm sure other people have, you know, dabbled in that, but
I got to say, I was really excited to do these projects because as far as I knew, no one had ever put marching percussion into electronic music.
okay. So trailblazer.
There's a handful of things, and there's some stuff in pop music where they've incorporated where it like really sounds like a marching band. Like there's like that Gwen Stefani song. But like to really like use it as if it's like if it's like an artistic
Voice.
object.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Yeah. Cool. So if we skip then ahead in terms of compositionally, you're doing the tracker, you're 15 years old. Where does it start to make sense as a trained musician, like your compositional?
That you'd have to skip pretty far ahead.
Pretty far.
Because the playing and the learning to be a percussionist really took the forefront.
Right.
And I knew I wanted to write music for a really long time, and it wasn't happening because I was so busy playing.
Right. So then, were there opportunities in your career that at least gave you the chance to flex that compositional voice?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the things that Alarm is known for is arranging electronic music for acoustic instruments. So the Alarm got kind of famous for this album they put out in 2003, which was arranging all this music of this artist Aphex Twin, who's a really, really progressive, kind of out there electronic musician. And they took all this really, really esoteric electronic stuff and meticulously arranged it for the chamber ensemble. And as a member of the group, I got a chance to do a lot of arranging in that context. And it was cool. It got me thinking again like a composer and like an orchestrator. And
Right.
it set me back on that path.
Was it easier than composition?
Yes,
Okay.
significantly easier.
Why?
Like the blank canvas thing is real.
Right. Right.
It's
Okay.
really, it's funny, like even to write music for film or for something that's set, that I'm like composing music for something else that already exists.
Right.
That feels 100 times easier. It's the starting from scratch that's like
Right.
very, very hard. So doing an arrangement, it's amazing. Like all the notes and rhythms are already there. You
Right.
just have to like come up with cool ways to make it sound.
Make it sound good.
Yeah.
Really cool. Okay, so like if you did you cut your teeth on sort of arranging for an ensemble, so you're putting pen to paper, 4 different instruments, you're learning how things sound. You know, if I
Yeah.
write this for that instrument, this sounds like that. That's good information, but you're not particularly stressed about it because it's not your own new work.
Yeah.
In that way. And you know, did you find that when you were in New York City working with all of these new composers, a sort of like envy to jump into that world? I mean, if you're in Alarm Will Sound and you're all your friends with these composers at Juilliard, you know you want to compose, and yet you're spending all your time working through other people's compositions. Was that difficult? Or are they two separate ideas completely?
I don't know. I didn't really think of it that way. What I was jealous about composers was like, they don't have to play the concert. I mean, for real, like I wanted to be in the position where like, and this is like the introvert thing, which I haven't really talked about yet, but like
We'll get there.
the thing where you like lock yourself in a room to do your work, right? So you don't, nothing you do is being watched. Like you can do all the stuff you need to do that is your work is behind closed doors. And then you open the door and you go, here's the thing.
Right.
And that's what I was jealous of, because the pressure as a performer is really, really crazy for everyone, but especially for me because of the kind of person I am. It's like I just never got comfortable being a performer. I still am not comfortable being a performer.
Right. But he's a really good one. So there's that. I mean, so okay, but where did you end up composing? Like when did it start? When did the bug finally kick back in? You were doing the tracking stuff when you were 15. Did that continue to some degree, or when did you?
Yeah, it was like 2009, 10-ish. I had this percussion studio in New York, and there was a video editor next door, and there was kind of a half of the space that was open, and I was like, I'm gonna take that space and set up a desk with speakers and a mixing board and the software that I need, and I'm gonna like sit there and write music and do like the writer thing, like where I show up and write, you know.
Right.
And it was off and on for a while because I was still learning how to do that. But that was basically where it started. And then 2016, 17, I was like, I really need to start releasing albums. So that's when I could start to consider myself full-time composing.
Okay, so that's a pretty long time, 7 years of
Yeah.
dabbling in it. But were you writing for acoustic music? Were
When-
you writing for musicians, or were you writing electronic?
Oh no, I was writing electronic music. Yeah.
Only.
Yep.
Okay, so that's crazy to me because it's like, you know, you're spending all this time playing other people's music, a very supportive, an advocate for new music,
Yeah.
wouldn't you say?
Sure.
And then when you go to do that for yourself, you're like, I don't need anyone playing it.
Yeah.
Why?
It seems like such a cop-out to do the thing where it's like, I need it to be perfect, and so I don't want like people playing it.
Right.
But there's
But-
there's a history of that with certain musicians. The one that I really relate to is this composer named Conlon Nancaro, and Nancaro started on any composer's path, and then he got so frustrated that he wanted to write this really rhythmically complex music, and he felt like it never got realized the way that he wanted to get realized by live players. And it's like, it's not like he was mad at human beings for being human. It's just that he wanted to do something that maybe was out of the realm of what was possible and that would be better done by machines. So he started composing for piano rolls, and he would actually cut out the holes from the piano rolls by hand to write this really, really complex music. And I like really, really relate to him because that's kind of what I want to do. Like, I never wanted to do something at the time.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about doing something that was a living object. So like I write a score and then I hand it to people, and then it's like still alive. Like people are gonna perform it, and it's gonna be slightly different. I wanted to paint a picture and have the painting be done and hang it on the wall. And to me, that's what electronic music is. You make it, you bounce the track, it's done, you know? And at that time, that's all I was thinking about.
So what about electronic music presents a challenge as opposed to, you're sort of explaining what's challenging to you about acoustic music and writing for that, but what is challenging about writing electronic music? Is it easier?
For me, I think so. It's easier to sit down and do it and to follow intuitive paths, to just let it happen, you know? There's so much baggage in contemporary music and in the classical tradition. It's really hard to be like, do I sound like this or that, or, you know? Whereas with electronic music, it's much easier to just sort of let go. For me, I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like thinking of your title of your album, Everything Imaginable Comes True.
Right.
And it sounds like a deep advocacy for writing electronic music, right?
Right.
I can do anything I want.
Sure.
And I'll make it happen.
Yeah.
But to me, that it's also, isn't that daunting as a composer, that the option's kind of everything? I mean, like, where do you start?
Yeah. It's particularly hard with electronic music. Like, what even is that?
Right.
I mean, like anything.
There's a bazillion.
There's
platforms
so
to
much
write on.
stuff. Yeah. You could argue that like all of pop music now is electronic music.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really, really broad, and I knew there were certain elements that were me that I needed to use, you know, and certain things like the marching percussion thing, like this really grid-based, very organized, rhythmically organized stuff. Like I knew this was all what I wanted to do, and it felt easier for me to find the path to that.
I read a quote from you. It was like excerpted from something you wrote, I think. And it said, I want to get it at least remotely correct. Like, there is at least 3.4 million YouTube videos out there for you, or YouTube tutorials out there to help you forget the original. Can you help finish?
Yeah. There's like 3 million YouTube videos out there that will help you forget the musical idea that you were trying to create.
Yeah.
It's like the thing when it's like I have this idea. Wait, I don't know how to do it in this software. Like, okay, go on YouTube and let's start looking at tutorials. And then next thing you know, you've forgotten the original idea you had.
Right.
That's a real problem for people who do electronic music, because sometimes you get really tripped up in the tech of it.
Yeah, well, when I was in the pandemic happened, and pretty much every musician, acoustic, violin, guitar, electronic music composer, had to get somewhat savvy with, working on Logic or Ableton on their computer and recording themselves, and I don't know, maybe just like find a way to be creative because there's nothing going on, there's no work. And when I was doing that, and for me it was mostly like figuring out how to teach, record students, and put together, little things during the pandemic. And I was using these kind of tutorials, and what was astounding to me was how many people, like I thought there was a lot of classical musicians. There is so many people out there just dabbling, creating music in this way that to me seems completely foreign, whether it be on, what do you use?
Ableton Live.
Ableton Live or another platform. So I felt like I stepped in, I like opened the curtain and was like, what?
Yeah.
Oh God. Because I already felt like such an imposter even trying to learn this stuff when,
and it could be, you could easily go down the rabbit hole of like, I want to buy this synth and I want to like download this software and like learn this new like musical programming language and like actually never write any music.
Right.
And it took me a couple years actually to identify that issue and figure out a way to move past it.
Right.
Sometimes you have to like let yourself have the tools that you have and nothing else, and force yourself to use them and like actually try to make art with them.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard
Parameters.
to stay on
Right.
track.
You got 3 colors on your palette.
Yeah.
You paint a painting with those 3 colors, and then you get better at it.
That's exactly
Right.
it.
So when did you played Hanabi, that with the tenor drum solo in it? That's an electronic music album. That's from
Everything
Everything
Imaginable.
Imaginable Comes True. And when did that come out?
2018.
Okay, so this is after your sort of full-time I compose now.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, full disclosure, I've always known Chris. We played some gigs together, and I knew he dabbled in electronic music, but I never really, listened to any of it for years. And when we initially connected, you had shared with me a piece that you wrote for Haruka Fuji. It was right over there. Wave.
Yeah.
And it was a marimba duo, and we were just sort of texting about stuff, and I think I asked about your music, and then you said I wrote this piece, and you let me hear it, and I kind of couldn't believe how good it was. I mean, I was just like, holy cow. I remember just like showering you with praise. I actually went back to the text last night and looked. I was like, was I? Yeah, I did. No, I definitely showered you with praise. There was a lot of Bitmojis. Bitmoji? When you're
Wow,
a
I'd
little
forgotten
cartoon,
about Bitmoji.
Yeah. And I was astounded with the sound, and Haruka and her sister commissioned this piece, and we're actually playing it tomorrow, called Marking Time. And that sort of is what led me to listen to your electronic music. But I was very shocked, because the first thing I listened to was the album you did after Everything Imaginable Comes True. And it's essentially a piano album.
Yes.
And when I listened to it, I was kind of confused. I was like, oh, so it's electronic music. But isn't this just a piano? And then I started to hear some funny sounds. But it's still just a piano. So how does this rhythmic unison, super intense clarity, heightened rhythm, percussionist composer end up, I'm going to have a solo piano album that's not for a pianist to play? Like, how does that happen?
I happened across the concept of first actually just quarter tone tuning, which is when you, instead of having 12 notes, you have 24 notes. So there's one in between each note, and that sounds crazy and weird. And I was just like playing with that and looking for a tool to use to play with that, because not all instruments, instruments aren't set up that way, and software pianos aren't really set up that way. So I found this piano sample library that could do that, and I was playing with it. And then I discovered an approach to tuning called just intonation, which led me down this rabbit hole that I'm still totally in, and blew my mind in 18 different ways. And I was so enamored with this concept and so fascinated by it that all the music that I wanted to write was basically just using this single piano sample library, which could retune itself dynamically. So one bar, it can be in one tuning, and then like the next bar, it's a completely different tuning. And so I can change it as much as I need. And because you can do that dynamic tuning, you can keep the piano in this just intonation, which is a super pure tuning that most of us have never heard. I had never heard it. And I got so into that, I just started writing all these piano etudes to explore that. And like a year later, I realized I had this album. And to me, like, that's the dream of how an album would come to be. It's not like I sit down and I have this album in my head and it's like, now I'm going to make it. It's like, no, I'm following my path as a writer, as an artist, and just doing my day to day. And there's a point where it's like, it all comes into focus and it's like, oh, this is what I did. Like, I made this album. And that's what it was. And it was like, really? Did I just write like a solo like a piano record. I
Right.
guess I did. So I was as surprised
So
as you
it
were.
wasn't even, I got to finish my album.
No way.
The album, it's coming out in September. It was like, I have an album.
Yeah, I mean, more it was like, is this an album? Like, I don't even know, you know?
That's a good title for an album. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, would a mortal like myself hear recognize just intonation is different from everyone else?
This is a segue.
Glad you
all
asked.
Segues. Yeah. Why don't you?
Oh,
No.
Rick, you get us out.
No. I texted him actually. I was like, hey, can you ask this question?
Disclaimer from me, which is that this stuff, it can be extremely subtle. It's hard to demonstrate. Sometimes I can make it work where it's like, everyone's like, wow, that's so different. And sometimes it's like, is that different? It depends on the instrument. It depends on the acoustics of the room. I definitely intend to try to make it happen, but it's like, it can be extremely subtle.
Right. But
Yeah.
just so everyone knows, what tuning is that piano? The big
Okay.
black one right there.
So the big black piano there is in equal temperament. Equal temperament refers to there's an octave, and within that octave, it's split into 12 pitches, and they're split equally. So the distance between each step is exactly the same, which seems like the math would be simple for that, but it's actually super complicated. Like it involves weird like 12th roots of 2 ratios, and like piano tuners have to like count the beats when they tune and use a thing. It's like, it's not natural. It's not what our ears hear naturally. It's something that's developed over a couple hundred years as a compromise to get the best approximation of these pure intervals.
Okay.
Equal temperament.
And so just intonation is the pure intervals, but it comes with some baggage.
Yeah, just the best way I can describe just intonation is that it's just an approach to tuning, which is using simple whole number ratios between notes.
But the number, though, even for me, explain, like, what do you mean the number?
Okay, I think I have a way to
Okay,
show that.
cool.
Okay, so let me make sure I've got everything up.
I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I think you're killing it. Okay. So the thing that I never really thought about was that like fundamentally pitches are just numbers. Like they're just speeds. Speed and pitch are like exactly the same thing. Pitch is just faster. So that's a pitch. We can all recognize that as a pitch, but if I slow it down, it's just a series of it's a regular periodic pulse.
Wow.
So like you could call that a rhythm. And that's a pitch. And there's no difference except that one's faster than the other, literally. And there's a certain point when your ear starts to experience it as roughness, and then you get above that, and you start to hear a note. Yeah. So, just intonation, if you're treating that as a number, like say like just in an arbitrary way to say like that's going at a rate of like 5. Just intonation is saying like I'm going to tune the next note by making that note be 10. Twice as fast, right? That's what that sounds like. And if you slow it down, that's the slower note. That's the faster note. And
So-
all the relationships between notes that we think of, especially in equal temperament, they're approximations of these simple ratios: 5 to 4, 5 against 4, 3 against 2, 16 against 15. Like there are approximations of those which are the pure intervals that our ears are able to understand.
Right. So what would a drum corps kid call equal temperament?
Equal temperament.
Yeah.
Dirty.
Yeah. And now how about just?
Clean.
Right. So
this is why, seriously, like this is why Just Intonation completely blew my mind, because I've been searching for clean my entire life as a musician, and like never thinking about pitch, never thinking about tuning, and then I realized like something really being in tune is just it being clean on the scale of pitch at this really, really fast speed.
wow.
And it's a really wonderful thing to think about, and it led me.
So can you show us some of the Just Intonation piano pieces?
Yes.
Some excerpts?
Yes.
Or, maybe it would
I've
be
got those-
cool to show and explain it, because I don't get it
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
The lattice.
Yeah, the lattices.
Okay, so the way that you can visualize pitches in this way are by using simple coordinates. So like you imagine from your math class, like X and Y axis, you can map pitches in a coordinate space to see their relationships to each other. And people who work in Just Intonation, instead of thinking of a scale as like a series of notes in a line, they think of a scale as like a block, a lattice of notes that each have a relationship to each other. So for example, like that. So if you know music, you can see on the bottom line, C, G, D, you've got perfect fifth relationships on the x-axis. And then C to E, if I was to go up, you have major third relationships on the y-axis. And then I've got a z-axis there too, a third dimension, which is just octaves, C to C, G to G. So like a more complicated version of this would be this one. Oh, that's the numbers. So that's like another way of thinking of those pitches, is multiples of 3, multiples of 5, multiples of 2. And this is the way people who do Just Intonation think about pitch. They map them onto these lattices.
Wow.
So I started doing, I wanted to visualize. This was so exciting to me, and I had never seen it done anywhere. And like no one taught me this in my conservatory music theory classes. Like I was equally excited and mad. I was like, I don't understand why this isn't part of the curriculum, because if singers sing a perfect fifth, they don't sing a tempered. I mean, if they were to sing perfectly in tune, they wouldn't sing. This is what our ears do naturally. So I was really excited, and I wanted to see if I could like visualize it. Should I play the
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So I started making these like little quick animations to sort of show the way these things sound.
Wow. Cool. It's very crafty and creative. Now, some of the album though. So
Yes.
where did that go? So that's
Yeah.
an exercise for you, right?
Yeah.
A visual exercise. Where did that go musically, and can you play us some of?
Yeah, so I was experimenting with all different kinds of techniques in Just Intonation, and ending up with little etudes, little pieces as I did that. And when it was all done and I realized I had an album, the album sort of looked like an encyclopedia of like a whole bunch of different approaches to using Just Intonation. That is a very deep topic that I don't know that
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of different stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
Maybe show us a little end result of that
Yeah.
exploration.
Should I play the Anna video or?
Yeah, let's do the video version.
Okay.
Right. Did anyone listen to the radio this morning? Wendy? Yes. You get a Sour Patch Kid. Only one. But at least there was no spoilers.
Thank you.
Oh, you can have one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is that they, in the 17th century into the 18th century, they hadn't really figured out equal temperament yet. They had all these tuning systems, mean tone tuning you might have heard of. Like they were tuning the instrument to try and get these pure intervals. And it's like, I always call it's like whack-a-mole. Like, oh, you make this interval really in tune, but then it screws up this interval and it screws up. And it's like everything just kind of gradually fixated on equal temperament, but that didn't really happen until, I guess, like 18th century. So I guess by Beethoven's time, yes, but Bach certainly. I mean, there's a lot of people that think that the Well-Tempered Clavier was him writing pieces in every key because every key sounded different.
Right.
Because like the further you get from C, the more out of tune things get and the more colorful and weird they sound, you know? Some people think that he didn't intend for that to be a showing off how every key sounds the same in equal temperament, you know?
There's some scholar articles saying that back then they were looking for equal temperament.
Yes.
And that they were obsessing over equal temperament. But nowadays we're going back to like, we are used to equal temperament, but now we want mean temperament and just
Exactly.
intonation.
The backlash to the backlash.
Yeah.
Let's see, Anna.
Okay. Matt still isn't here, right? I'm like dreaming of EQing that bass
Yeah, I
out,
know.
but-
I know.
Okay.
To me, there's something like so beautiful, but also really haunting when it's visualized like that. It's like mystical a little bit, but also the fact that there's a grid underneath all of it all is freaky to me.
Yep.
But at the same time, when I listened to that album, I think that the impression I got initially, I'm like way not on the uptick of what I'm listening to. I'm just enjoying it. And I just noticed that I always felt like it was like a musical hug to me. Even the most dissonant things, would feel like at home a little bit. And you saying that that's how we hear naturally, like that's we're trained to hear that. This is how we're all actually hearing. And you could be like, oh, well, I don't have a trained ear, right? But there's a grid under it all.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the real world. That's how frequencies work.
Yeah, it's this is inherent. This is the way this is like literally the way that the physiology of your ear works, is to hear simple whole number relationships between frequencies. It's just literally like no one has to learn that. It's how we understand the human voice. It's how we understand the difference between pitches of voice, how we recognize different people's voices. It's inherent.
That's the brain.
Yes.
Here, right?
Totally.
That's how it goes to I'm asking, I guess, if that's what you mean, the natural.
It's both. I think it's both the brain for sure, and also the way the inner ear is built. Yeah, and the way I put together the album and the sort of inspiration for how I pieced it together as a story is to make it's sort of realizing that's inspired by this late 19th century physiologist and music theorist named Hermann Helmholtz. And Helmholtz wrote the book on the physiology of the ear and how we hear sound. And then the other part of the book, it's called On the Sensation of Tone. The other part of the book is like a music theory textbook about how all this just intonation and all that stuff.
Wow. So I this is right before, we gotta move through this a little quick, but this is right before I commissioned Chris to do Launch Party. And I had heard this album, and he had expressed, I'm interested in composing for real people, but I just haven't been like very go-getter about it. And that's kind of why you shared with me Marking Time.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that and I heard this album, I was like, I know this guy composes every single day, and he expressed interest. I have to get him to write us a piece, because I was so moved by this record, truly. And
always a little bit of ambivalence about writing for human beings.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
I mean, it was. So I'm so grateful that he did say yes, and it was a discussion, and we made it work. But here we are. You wrote us a piece for violin, cello, piano, and percussion, and you said, "Can I include some just intonation stuff?" And I said, "Please do." And we have Launch Party. Mm-hmm. So day one of writing Launch Party. What's a day in the life of Chris Thompson when blank slate, I'm going to start, to the day you gave it to me this summer?
Day one always is, I have some generative tools, which are like in the software, ways to sort of come up with chords and rhythmic stuff. And it's like the computer will sort of spit out things that are really raw and not put together. And then I start tinkering with them and intuitively and just like making them into something. That's kind of how I start with everything. So there was that. The other thing specifically with this commission was I knew it was for this geographical area. Mm-hmm. And I knew that there was an online database of sampled audio from NASA that I had always heard about, and that I had been looking for an excuse to use that material as samples in music for a long time. And so, yeah, sort of day one, the other part of it was like downloading those samples and starting to figure out starting to look for like what is the rhythm in them, what is the pitch in them, starting to explore them and take them apart.
So he clearly uses these NASA samples in this piece. You're all going to hear it tomorrow. But can you take us through the electronic portion of it? Can you show us what you used from the NASA database?
Yeah, totally.
And can somebody text Pam? Can you text Daniel and Steven that we're running a little late? Thanks.
Should I wrap this up?
No, I want to see it. This is the grand finale. You get the
Yes.
sneak peek, no spoiler alert version of Launch Party.
Yeah, so there are some, this is like a super classic, is this, the sound of the beep of Sputnik was like one of the first sounds to be recorded to come from space. So there's that. There's also, I tried not to do this too much because it could get corny, but to use the actual voices of the people running these missions. So this one was just too good not to use.
Discovery Sterile computers now have primary control of critical vehicle function.
Yeah, this one, I have to remember what this is. Dinks and donks. Yeah, so the InSight lander on Mars, the InSight lander, there was sounds being made by the size monitor in the InSight lander caused by friction of the parts. And the people, it's like, I guess as the sun sets and it cools down, they contract and they start to get loose and they rub up against each other. And the people running this mission referred to them as the dinks and the donks.
Is this the actual file, or have you manipulated this?
This is the raw file. And so I'll show you so there's some rhythm in this.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
you hear rhythm. Right.
And I've messed with it in a bunch of different ways, but where is it? Here it is. So that has some nice rhythm to it. Should I go on?
Yes.
So the Kepler Space Telescope is this telescope that's out in space searching for exoplanets, which sounds amazing, and I don't understand what that means. But I guess it takes pictures, and what it says is the light curve waves to sound. So I guess it's the pulses, something about the pulses of the light, they have a way of turning it into audio. And this is what that sounds like. Oops, sorry. And I was able to use that actually a lot in the piece. Let's see if I can find it really quick. Yes. And then the other thing from the Kepler thing was this crazy bass note. Oh yeah, and I guess the last one I'll show is Quindar tones. So when a satellite is orbiting, this is crazy to be in Huntsville, like explaining to people about this is right.
Just take a Sour Patch Kid. You'll get through it. Yeah.
My understanding of this is that Quindar tones are when the satellite is orbiting. there's a communication center somewhere, like for example in Huntsville, and then as the satellite orbits, it needs to connect to a different communication center. So for example, like in Hawaii. And the way that they sync these things up and transfer over is by a series of tones. And as this series of tones happen, the dude on the thing goes, like, counts down and counts back up.
The dude on the thing.
Yeah. So this is the Quindar tones and also the dude on the thing.
We didn't realize it was going to be so tight.
The Houston contact with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, enter test. Contact Hawaii, contact 100%, unit modulation installed. Roger Hawaii, refuel out, clear also.
Yeah. So
You had to listen to Chris. You doesn't listen to lots of these to pick out the ones.
yeah, it's not like a huge database. Like, it's definitely something you can, in one sitting, you can listen to all their offerings. It's public domain, and they have a Creative Commons thing on it, which is like, yeah, it's okay to download them and use them, manipulate them, share them. I think I can't like resell them, but
Are those beeps just intonation?
the beeps.
One, E.
Yeah. So in the way that I've used them in the piece, yes. So in the piece, they are tuned in a pure way to what's happening in the
So
piece.
you change the pitch of it.
Oh yeah, yeah. So the things this is a good example of, like, with sampling, you can change the rhythm however you want. You can speed it up, slow it down. You can make super minute adjustments in the pitch. You can do anything these days with samples.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, that's pretty. I'm in awe. That's pretty awesome. And yeah, right. I want to just ask one last question, because this went good and long, and I think for good reason, and it was a good thing. Why commission music? Why create art? Why put new stuff into the world? Like, why should anyone do that? Why is it important to you? To you or to anyone?
Wow.
Yeah, that's the big stuff. Here's a tee, here's a ball. Just
I can only like make it personal.
make it personal.
I want to talk about like commissioning as a whole, and institutions, and what you're doing with this, which is amazing. And like, I can't really speak to that as much as I feel like for me, it's like breathing a little bit. And for a long time, I just kind of felt like I wasn't breathing. And it just has to, I can't, I don't know. It's I can't sort of function if I don't know that I'm creating a thing, creating something to put out into the world. I don't know if other people feel that way, but that's the best sort of
That's as
answer
good,
I can
good
give.
advocacy for putting you out into the world as I've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
So how about a big hand for Chris Thompson? And another big hand for our founding members who commissioned this piece. So thank you so much. I can't wait for you all to hear it. I can't wait to do this more with more composers, and hopefully we get to do a second one with you one day.
Yeah.
And this means a lot, and thanks for being here. And we have to sort of get out of here sort of quickly, but I just really appreciate everyone being curious and taking this deep dive. And I think tomorrow you're going to have a much better listening experience to the whole concert, and especially launch party, because of this. So thank you.